Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad-Bhagavatam. It's Canto 1, Chapter 13, text number 22, and it's called Dhritarashtra Quits Home. Interesting use of the word quits. Leaves home. Okay, this is the strong face of the material energy coming out here. Annapureva vadhiro mandapragyascha sampratam vishirna danta mandagni saragakapam udvam. Anda is blind. Pura from the beginning. Eva certainly. Vadhira hard of hearing. Mandapragya memory shortened. Cha and sampratam recently. Vishirna loosened. Danta teeth. Mandagni liver action decreased. Saraga with sound. Kapam coughing with mucus, much mucus. Udvahan coming out, and a translation. You have been blind from your very birth, and recently you have become hard of hearing. Your memory is shortened, and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose, your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. And purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Symptoms of old age, which had already developed in Dhritarashtra, were all, one after another, pointed out to him as warning that death was nearing very quickly. And still, he was foolishly carefree about his future. The signs pointed out by Vidura in the body of Dhritarashtra were signs of apakshaya, or dwindling of the material body before the last stroke of death. The body is born, it develops, stays, creates other bodies, dwindles, and vanishes. But foolish men want to make a permanent settlement of the perishable body and think that their estate, children, society, country, etc. will give them protection. With such foolish ideas, they become overtaken by such temporary engagements and forget altogether that they must give up this temporary body and take a new one, again to arrange for another term of society, friendship and love, again to perish ultimately. They forget their permanent identity and become foolishly active for impermanent occupations, forgetting altogether their prime duty. Saints and sages like Vidura approach such foolish men to awaken them to the real situation. But they take such sadhus and saints as parasites of society, and almost all of them refuse to hear the words of such sadhus and saints, although they welcome show-bottle sadhus and so-called saints who can satisfy their senses. Vidura was not a sadhu to satisfy the ill-gotten sentiment of Dhritarashtra. He was correctly pointing out the real situation of life and how one can save oneself from such catastrophes. Amagana timirandasya jana jana shalakaya chaksharan militamina tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Shtapatam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swa Padantikam. Vishtabadai Krishna Vastai Pradeshmani Satsruptas Goswami Tinamani Namo Vishtabadai Krishna Vastai Pradeshmani Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Bacharini Nirvashesha Sanivadi Pastyata Deshtari Pancha Kalpatu Vishya Kivasindhu Vacha Padita Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, there is a very interesting point being made. It's more than just a point, of course. It's a complete destruction of any credibility of anybody staying here in the material world. It's the facts being presented. What's it? Open heart surgery without an anesthetic. by Vidura, telling his brother, he's a disgrace. Okay, you can just go through the ones. There's blind, hard of hearing, short memory, intelligence disturbed, teeth loose, liver defective, and coughing up mucus. That's the material body for you. And what is the what's been explained in the purport basically is that why are you making out that that's going to be a permanent situation when it's so clearly not? It often kind of interests me how people want to be, I have to find myself, I have to do the thing I really want to do, and whereas a lot of time that can be just for this particular lifetime. So, don't get too hung up about it. On the other hand, you can actually do what you're good at doing, but do it for Krishna. That's the difference in spiritual life and material life. If you're cooking a meal, you're cooking it to please Krishna, not that so you can be satisfied. If you're decorating a house, well, decorate a temple instead. I'm in the decor business of selling oil paintings to people, and they like to decorate their house. But if you can decorate Krishna's house, that's actual utilization of the material energy in the service of spirit. Krishna doesn't need it, obviously, as we know, but still we need it because our consciousness is there, because we're trying to get to that stage of pleasing Krishna. Service, this is such an important, this is really what we're all about. Like, it's the constitutional position of the living entity. I've often, I marvel, even at my own life, growing up in the West, of the rugged individualist against society, trying to be yourself. And therefore absolutely forgetting who oneself actually is as a servant of Krishna. The self is generally presented as being, you find yourself, you know who you are, you have this, it's such a glorification of the false self. And this is what Prabhupada talks about here in the purport. They forget their permanent identity and become foolishly active for impermanent occupations, forgetting altogether their prime duty. With such foolish ideas, they become overtaken by such temporary engagements and forget altogether that they must give up this temporary body and take a new one, again to arrange for another term of society, friendship and love, again to perish ultimately. Foolish men want to make a permanent settlement of the perishable body and think that their estate, children, society, country, etc. will give them protection. This is basically the activity of the material world. Where I'm living at the moment, where a couple of my neighbours are getting some stuff done to the house, and I'm going to get it done as well. But there's some value, obviously, in maintenance. It's important. But to the degree that you actually become identified with your house, or that you're trying to get some permanence in this situation and trying to give yourself some permanence from it, that's where the illusion happens. I am my car, I am my Rolls Royce, I am my Mini Cooper. We identify so heavily with everything that we do, and we think that it's us. I'm just repeating this. I think anybody that's listening here has probably heard this 100 times, if not 1,000 times. But the importance of repeating it is that we can remember it and we can keep it in mind, because we are constantly still deluded, eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. These are different activities of the body, and the soul identifying with these different activities will keep us identifying with the body. So, but what we need to do is stop identifying with the body, stop trying to please the body, stop trying to please the mind, but instead try to please Krishna. Oh, I'm happy now because I've got this. I'm happy because I have this. I'm happy now in my job because I'm doing this. Now, there is, obviously, as I said earlier, there is a certain, these things need to be there. These kind of material requirements are there. But as Prabhupada explained a lot of the time, just take them as much as the salt. You don't put masses of salt on your food because it makes it too salty. You can't eat it. So in the same way, you just take it just enough to keep yourself, body and soul together. And that's the message coming from the spiritual energy. You know, we've got this body, we've got this conditioning. So we just have to use it to the degree that we need to stay kind of above board, safe, sane, all of those things. And, you know, how do you know how much? You know how much. Whatever, if you're taking a certain amount and you're finding it's preventing your spiritual identity, spiritual life, spiritual practices, then you know that you've got the balance wrong. We'll find later on in these purports, Prabhupada goes on to explain that you don't have to give up spiritual life. You don't have to give up material life. But it comes at a point, this is what's happening here, is that Vidura is advising Dhritarashtra to get out of home, get out of there straight away, don't hang around. It's a bad place to be. You're in a ridiculous situation. And so are we all in the same boat? We had a discussion on Inishrat there recently when Sripur brought up the point that, Prabhupada didn't say that we should just all be sannyasis or whatever. You know, if your family is engaged in spiritual life, then that's also a good situation. So our point is that preaching is the essence, you know. Whatever it works for preaching, that's the bottom rule, the kind of the underlying thing. If your preaching is being upset by staying at home, then just don't hang around. That's the idea. But then again, I've seen so often in the past people say that, oh, my preaching's been upset and I have to leave. And basically, it's just a discomfort or this disgruntlement with their actual material situation. And they're trying to get out of that material situation by citing spiritual practices or spiritual mentalities or spiritual insights. But actually, a lot of the time that they're wrong because we're not that advanced. We actually do have to undergo our material scenarios in order for us to learn properly. Spiritual life isn't just happen like that. It takes a while, so you have to be patient, determined, patient, and enthusiastic. Why? Because we're in a very static situation. We're being stuck in a place for a long time. We're like the earth, which is stuck at the bottom of the ocean. And we're waiting for Lord Varaha to come and take us out of that, by his beautiful tusks to bring us our consciousness back into a spiritual kind of way of looking at things. So we've been here for a long time. So we can't just immediately sort of, I want to be this just because I want to for that specific second. We can see how steady we are in Krishna consciousness by seeing how steady our mind is when we're chanting. How long can we stay on a spiritual thread or a spiritual consciousness? Also reading. Of the two, I find reading that a little bit more absorbing than chanting. It's just my particular proclivity. If I chant a lot, I can actually start to get some stability in my chanting and in the focus of hearing the holy name. But I find it very difficult to do that without actually reading. So the two aspects of hearing and chanting give you that solidity for both in that sense. And then kirtan as well. Kirtan can fix you up in Krishna consciousness because we need to be aware of the spiritual sound. We need to be aware of the spiritual energy. We've been stuck in matter for a long time. Always remember that time I was in the Paradiso, I think it was called, or the Melkweg in Amsterdam, and this was the pinnacle of hippiedom, or of, to get to this place and to be here and to be experiencing it, and I was absolutely miserable. It's like that you're stuck in dissatisfaction, in material non-satisfaction. So really, we're meant to be alert to spiritual life, but we're heavily covered. So we're heavily illusioned. We've been heavily illusioned. So it's not a wonder to understand that we're not always spiritually present or spiritually aware, spiritually conscious, spiritually cognizant, being aware that Krishna is there, that the spiritual world is there. But that is where we want to be. And then the benefits are unbelievable. The benefits are unsurpassable, because you are actually in touch with the spiritual sound or the spiritual energy, and you're being looked after by Krishna, by Krishna's embrace. It is ultimately Krishna's embrace. Krishna comes here to help us and to convince us. I mean, even when Lord Brahma he was creating the world, and he only heard the word tapa, and then Krishna appeared and then disappeared. Same thing with Dhruva Maharaj. Krishna appeared and disappeared. But it's enough to let us understand that Krishna is there. And also that we're on a minute by minute basis we can be aware of Krishna. At least on a daily basis we can be aware of Krishna. When we get up in the morning, that the super soul gets us up, gets us awake, and we pay homage to the super soul for doing that, for bringing us into the world, so that we can actually be a servant of Krishna for today. Krishna, okay, come on, I want you to do this. I want you to do this. What a nice feeling. People always talk about feeling wanted. Krishna is the expert manager, the expert psychologist, the expert motivator. There's nobody can motivate like Krishna can motivate, because he gives you a taste of the spiritual energy, which is ever increasing. So that energy of ever increasing is blissful, is the most intoxicating of any intoxicant, because it puts you in touch with eternality. I mean, Sakchidananda Vigraha, eternality and bliss and knowledge. The knowledge is the certainty that this information is coming from Krishna, and this energy is coming from Krishna, and Krishna is inconceivable. That is the understanding. Krishna is inconceivable. So anything can happen with the inconceivable. It's said that even a blind man can see stars in the sky, a lame man can cross over mountains, and a dumb person can speak like a great orator. These are the symptoms of spiritual energy. It's you're not dull or morose. You're not, because the material world has got plenty of armaments to keep us in depression. But the spiritual energy doesn't allow for that. That's not the spiritual energy. Your spiritual energy means pratyakcha vagamam dharmam shashukam kartamabhyam. Means you're joyful. You're happy. How can there be happiness without peace? You're peaceful. That's the nature of this wonderful. I'm not even going to use the crummy word vaccine. It's not a vaccine. It's an ambrosial, nectar-like, eternal taste for spiritual life. I'm I'm just speaking from the little couple of glimpses that I've been able to, by the mercy of the spiritual parampara, to speak about it in at least in some sort of way. It gives you just that conviction, and that's the. But what I'm saying is, it's joyfully performed. You're ever thinking of different ways in which you can serve Krishna. That's what it means. It gives you that kind of insight. It unleashes that creativity that is us as a servant of God. That's where the creativity lies, in the ability to different ways in which to please Krishna. And Krishna is very, very subtle as well. It's not as if everything has to be broadcast or anything like that. There's great reciprocation, and the reciprocation between the living entity and Krishna is so great that Krishna himself, although we're talking about the liberated living entities like the gopis in Vrindavan, that Krishna wants to personally come down and experience that. And you notice that all the devotees, all the Lord Balaram is the first expansion of Krishna. He actually wants to please Krishna. That's what he is. He's a servant of Krishna. Advaita Charya, he prays. He's Mahavishnu. He's creating all the universes, but still he wants to serve Krishna. So he prays to Krishna to come down. So, and even as Lord Advaita, he's senior to Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya always treats him as such. Still, Advaita Charya is always looking for opportunities to serve Lord Chaitanya, because that is the nature of the service that is there. And at the very end of the Adi Lila, first Adi Lila 1, there's actually verse after verse after verse after verse speaks about the great personalities who find the bliss in serving Krishna. And then in fact, Lord Chaitanya comes to find the bliss of serving Krishna. So somehow or other we have to get ourselves into that service position, away from the rugged individual which I was talking about earlier. My particular version, roaming around in Holland trying to be a great something or other. So many ways we're trying to be a great writer. Studying in UCD, all the different writers. Can I be a great writer? It's just, so what? So what for all the piddle that's coming out of your brain? If it's in the service of Krishna, then that's absolutely the same thing as building a temple for Krishna, being a writer for Krishna, being a creative writer for Krishna, a creative musician for Krishna. Being a creative architect for Krishna, a creative designer for Krishna. It just takes on a different force, energy, and then just work away, and conjointly, work conjointly with others, cooperatively with other devotees, and to bring about a great revolution in this impious lives of this misdirected civilization, and practical activity in the foreground of spiritual life. That is the message coming from Nectar of Instruction, which is one of the major work from Rupa Goswami, because almost the whole philosophy is in 11 verses. But the purport's there that Prabhupada gives a very, very powerful, but one of the things that he does stress, and it is coming, all practical activity in the foreground of spiritual life. Do something practical. Prabhupada would often say that. Prabhupada himself is so practical, because he was so determined to bring Krishna consciousness to others. So this is the parampara which we find ourselves in. So we should be just doing practical things to serve Krishna. So what's the problem? What's the difficulty? We just find something to serve Krishna with. there's something that we're kind of, our psychophysical propensity is kind of indicating that way, and then just do it for Krishna. And then do it together, do it as the movement, as the Krishna consciousness movement. Different ways in which you can spread Krishna consciousness. Build a building for Krishna, help buy a building for Krishna, help clean the temple for Krishna, help spread the Dharma in universities for Krishna. Use your creative skills of designing posters, be a wordsmith for Krishna. These are all practical activities in the foreground of spiritual life. Become a brilliant photographer for Krishna, great designing great videos for Krishna. These are just practical activities. Become a great scholar for Krishna. Study the scriptures minutely for Krishna. Be a lawyer for Krishna. We have to undergo so much hassle going through so many forms in the material world today. You almost have to sign a form just to exist. You don't exist. No, you're not on my computer. You don't exist. And you have to go through all this nonsense, doing the banking, do banking for Krishna. Practical activity in the foreground of spiritual life, and do it together to spread the Krishna consciousness movements, serve the great acharyas, serve Srila Prabhupada in spreading this message all around the world. Become a psychologist for Krishna. Become a sociologist for Krishna. A historian for Krishna. A grammarian for Krishna. We can do so many different activities for Krishna. So these are all different ways in which we can help spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world. I suppose that's some of the things that I was talking about here. The other great point coming from this verse, of course, is that what's the verse? Krishna. Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha, such a great soul is very rare. Or Manushanam Shahasre Shudma Kastinya Taram Siddhe Yatatam Api Siddhanam Yamam Meoveti Tatvadaha. I mean, there's out of many thousands of men, one may endeavour for perfection. Of those who attain perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. So there is, Prabhupada in the purport makes the point here that saints and sages like Vidura approach such foolish men to awaken them to the real situation. But they take such sadhus and saints as parasites of society, and almost all of them refuse to hear the words of such sadhus and saints. So, they refuse to hear. But then what do they do instead? Although they welcome show bottle sadhus and so-called saints who can satisfy their senses. So even in the bridge preaching, we've got to be very careful as well. That's my understanding. We've got to be very careful that we just don't water the thing down so much, in the sense of trying to be nice to people again and just, it's okay to eat meat. Yeah, well, we just kind of become so watered down that people can't understand what we're saying, what we're talking about. Not that we throw the pearls before swine. Again, I don't want to present myself as anything less than. Anyway, we have to be careful about who we reveal the knowledge to. And also we have to be, according to time, place, and circumstance, we have to be conscious of who we're speaking to. So this again is another question of balance. But at the same time, sometimes there's a place for the Vidura, slap, so that people can actually wake up at some point. But we want to be sure that we're a Vidura before we start slapping people. Because we'll get slapped very quickly ourselves if we do. But at the same time, we do have to speak up strongly. Prabhupada would also like that. Speaking strongly for Krishna. Just we have to do it in the right circumstance. When, or else we want to be very clear about what our position is when we're speaking strong. But that's, I'm saying, it's we have to be careful, because then you just kind of, it happened, Vyasadeva And he had to be taught by his spiritual master Narada that you didn't speak about Krishna. You're just really helping the people become still stuck in material energy. You wrote all these things, but I mean, they're not. People aren't taking them seriously. So we've got it is a fact that which something which can happen. So we have to be careful not to let it happen, but speak strongly or act strongly. Maybe that's a good one. Act strongly. Don't just do nothing. Because you gotta do something, and you have to make some sort of impact for Krishna. Practical activity in the foreground of spiritual life. Preaching means we're making effect. We're making a difference in society, the actual society that's there. We have to push people apart and say, no, this is it. This is it. We're establishing the absolute truth based on the Vedic scriptures. That's what we're doing. So you have to push for that. So it takes a bit of energy. Enthusiasm, determination, and patience. We're determined, patient. We have to be enthusiastic. Enthusiasm. Sometimes we're not. Well, I speak for myself. I'm not realized. I'm not. I don't. I'm in ignorance. But at the same time, I do get some insight, and that insight at least I can share. At least I can be enthusiastic to follow the words of the spiritual master. Even if I don't realize what the spiritual master realizes, at least I can serve the spiritual master, and in that way, then there's some realization will come, and in that way, then I'll be able to make some impact. But it is that determination has to be there. That determination which is unbreakable, and which is held steadfast by yoga practice, is determination in the mode of goodness. We have to reach those levels of determination and patience. That patience is the mode of goodness, and enthusiasm. Because we're given that enthusiasm by Krishna. Prabhupada will give us that enthusiasm to spread the message. If we don't deviate from what he says, basically. And that doesn't mean that you just do everything word for word verbatim. It means that you are an individual. This is the real sense of individuality. You're an individual in the world, and you use that individuality in your own situation to spread the Dharma according to the best of your ability. That's what individuality means, not this other kind of, I'm trying to glorify myself. I'm self-absorbed, self-obsessed. That's not individuality, that's just obnoxious. But using your ability in the service of Krishna, of Prabhupada, that's what your individuality is. And you have to make decisions based on that. And you actually work on inspiration from Krishna in that situation as well. Prabhupada one time was asked, does Krishna actually tell you? And one of the devotees says, well, no, it's Krishna's giving. And Prabhupada says, no, Krishna actually tells me, So we want to get to that level of certainty. But we can reach much higher levels of certainty that we're acting on Krishna's behalf by strong sadhana, by hearing, and then Krishna will empower us, basically. But even though we're still thwarted by the modes of passion and ignorance, we can still be very determined to hear Krishna, just to be determined to hear Krishna. Because if we don't hear Krishna, we'll be lost. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. We'll be lost. But we have to hear Krishna. So plenty of hearing, Shravanam, Kirtanam. And then we're more likely to hear Krishna speaking to us through other individuals, through the spiritual master, through the Shastra, through our rounds, through our Kirtan. Okay, I'll stop there. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai.